So, good evening, everyone. So, yes, again, tonight, sometimes it's always, what am I going to talk tonight? So, yes, and just remind me when I was meditating here. So, I just happy to be here. And sometimes people find that it's very difficult to be peaceful. Why? Because we are not content, isn't it? We are not happy with this moment, isn't it? So actually, contentment is a key to lead you to the peaceful mind, and is never underestimate the power of contentment, because it's really deepens your stillness, your samadhi. Because when we move, when our mind moves, then the mind is not still. When we crave, we want something, we are not content, isn't it? So we are not happy to be here. I remember that, it reminds me when I was in Thailand many years ago, when I was the monastery that I stayed at, there was in this south of Thailand. And I remember the first few days when I was there, I was quite unhappy to be there, because I was I was quite judgmental, because I was thinking that it's a nunnery. I was thinking that the nuns there are not really practicing the Dhamma and, the fault-finding mind, because this is how we've been conditioned, isn't it? The first thing we look what's wrong. So then I find fault. But if you want to find fault, you can anytime find fault, isn't it? So I remember there's something that I find fault with the chanting. The chanting being too slow. I was sitting there, the more I think about it, how slow the chanting, the more agitated, the more irritated I feel, I was thinking, my goodness, they usually early in the morning, we get up early in the morning, 3 o'clock, so we had chanting, and then evening also chanting, and we chant in Pali and chant in Thai. And I find it so slow. I was thinking, I was really complaining, I said, this chanting is terrible, and it's like running out of battery, is so slow, and the chanting make me feel down, make my, and I just all sorts of reasons, that I just find fault. I think that this chanting is a problem, the chanting, because I find that it's very difficult to sit. I feel so annoyed with the chanting, and then I started to think when this chanting is going to stop. Then I realized actually I myself complaining all the time. I keep finding fault even with the chanting. Then actually I realized that, and I remember I planned to go, I planned to leave. I said, no, I'm not going to say I'm going to leave tomorrow. I just don't like this, the way they practice. I mean, of course they are not perfect. There's no perfect monastery in the world, Even Dhammasara I always tell people that Dhammasara is not perfect, and it will never be perfect. I say it's not. But this is how, we when we focus on that, the shortcoming on someone, the things that we don't like, then actually we manifest, isn't it? This thing so small becomes really big and become my problem. And I realized that, then I made a determination. I said, no, I'm not going to leave, I'm going to stay. Because I realized that I asked myself, if I'm not happy here, is it that if I go to another monastery, am I going to be happy? And actually, it's just amazing, isn't it? Actually, deep down, we all know, we have, know. And then I answer myself, and I used to ask myself questions, and I answer. I said, no, I won't be happy if I'm not happy here, because it's not the place, because I bring that kind of mindset with me, isn't it? For finding mind, I bring that with me. So if I bring that kind of mindset wherever I go, the same. So I won't be happy, And this is how we fought finding. So there's it's not happy. So the reason why the mind cannot be still, because we are not happy, we are not content what we got. So nowadays, especially I can see we have compared to, when I was young, when we got an apple, we feel so happy. Nowadays, food we have abundant, and people tend to take it for granted, isn't it, whatever things we have. And we just, the craving, the we wanting more. It's never good enough. This reminds me of the Buddha's teaching. There's a Metta Sutta, the loving kindness discourse. The Buddha mentioned, the Buddha mentioned humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied. So the contentment actually comes from the sense of self, like you weaken the sense of self. So I remember sometimes ago someone asked me, what is the difference between complacent and contentment? I do want to be complacent. So I said, that is the different. Contentment and complacent different with someone is complacent, someone with very big ego. Because he think that the Buddha talked about the three concepts. I'm better, I'm as good, I'm worse. So with the ego, because I'm better than you, I know better. So you feel complacent that, I don't have to listen to you, I know the best. So that is complacent. Contentment, actually, when someone content, someone have a small ego. Yeah, very humble. Because the reason why someone content has small ego, because the reason why we crave is come from the sense of self, the ego. Isn't it? The controlling. We want to control because of the sense of self. We want to control everybody else, outside us. We want to control our partner, we want to control our children, I remember just recently when I was in Singapore, as usual, that we have a couple to see me. And at first the husband come to see me, and later the wife, and then the mother, and because having marriage problems. And when I spoke to the husband said that because the fact that he married his wife, because of he just want to fulfill the expectation of his parents, because his parents like his wife, like constantly from when he was growing up, he's constantly have to live up to his parents' expectation. So, and obviously he didn't really love his wife that much, So, and he said that, I have to, he said it's unfair to even to his wife, that at least, he said he want to stop the relationship because of, he said it's good that it's fair to his wife, that maybe his wife can find someone that is really more suitable rather than that, because they come to a point that they don't talk to each other, and then I spoke to the wife, and the wife tried very hard to make up. Then I said, normally I never give them any suggestion whether they should make up or they should break up, because it's leave it to them. But I can only give them advice, how I view, what is my view and what is my opinion. So I told the wife, I said, if only on one part you try to make up, but if your husband not willing to make up, it's not going to work. No matter how hard you try, isn't it? You have to be both sides willing to make up. It's not only one side. And I can see how sometimes parents, that I feel so, sometimes it makes me feel really sad. Like some parents try to make the children to fulfill their dreams. I can't make it. I hope my son can make it, or my children can make it. And they really force them to do things that they don't like. They never ask them whether you want, whether you like it. Because come from the sense of self, we control. We control everyone. We control, the person around us. We become very manipulative and controlling. Becomes a control freak. And actually, when I'm talking about this, it reminds me there was a couple that one day the wife was preparing breakfast in the kitchen, and the husband rushed into the kitchen, and he said, And he rushed to the kitchen and he's shouting to the wife. He said, no, you're putting too much egg at one time. It's too much. And then not enough butter. Put more butter. And he said, salt. Where is salt? I told you already, put salt. And then butter is not enough. I told you already the other day, not enough butter. You didn't get butter. And then the wife turn around, look at him. What's the matter? What's wrong with you? I'm only, frying a couple of eggs. Why your reaction, Then he said, no, I'm just trying to let you know that how I feel like when I'm driving. Sometimes a backseat driver, isn't it? Don't turn left, don't turn right. Stop, that car is coming, we just like to control. We always want what we want, isn't it? The one thing actually, just the one thing drives us, want more. So we never appreciate what we've already got, isn't it? And it's a loss. Some people, sometimes I feel strange when I look at the people, they come to talk to me, they're never happy. They're never happy with what they got. They always think that they're not good enough. Then I told them, actually, you did very well. I said, look at how far you have achieved, how much you have achieved. But they always look at the others, that like they achieve 80%, they always look at the 20% yet, And then they're just, and they're not appreciating themselves. I find that it's important to learn to appreciate ourselves. Nowadays, many people, because I used to speak to lots of people, I noticed that they don't appreciate themselves. Even some of them, they're really doing so well. And they still think that they're not good enough. Actually you got 70% is a very, very rare species already. It's really good. But we all looking at the other 30% that yet, And then they keep for finding mind, and they find fault with themselves, they find fault with others. When we keep doing that, we are not happy, and then we try to control others. And then we always think that the problem is outside, but we don't control ourselves, isn't it? We're looking at the wrong place. We control others, try to make the others do what we want them to do, to live up to our expectation, but we never control our speech, our mind, our action. That part we don't control, but we only want to control that part. So we control the wrong, we're looking at the wrong place. The place that we should control is our mind, body, and speech. Sometimes how much harm, that's how much, damage we cause to others, isn't it? Through our speech, to our action, how we speak. So that's why before we speak, actually, we control, we reframe ourselves, restrain ourselves, especially with our speech. I remember when I was a trainee nun, actually for many years, I made a determination that I'm not going to speak unless I was invited. Like I don't give my opinions and and my views. I never put up my hand to say something. It's always when I ask that, how do you see this? How do only I speak. The reason why, because I can see for myself. Sometimes it's just to be honest, that inner integrity, because I can see from myself when I want to speak. Actually, I can see where am I coming from. I just want people to know how much I know. And the reason I speak. So when the moment when I realize that I know that I come from that place, that I want people to know that I, how much I know, that it's come from the ego, then I start to restrain myself. No, if I want to speak, if based on that, want other people to know how much I know, I refrain myself from talking, from speaking, because that is reinforce my sense of self, my ego, and make it really big, And I remember when the first talk that I give, someone came up to me. He said, "Oh, I'm really surprised that you can talk," Because sometimes I can see from myself that the ego, Sometimes actually we learn more from listening, isn't it? Than talking. When we listen, we learn more. We don't learn from talking, isn't it? We learn from listening. When we sit, when we listen, we learn a lot. I learned a lot actually when I was just listen to what people said. Actually, you learn a lot. So we learn through listening, is not through talking. And this is actually is also reframe myself from, actually to help to strengthen my mind. To set things that causes hurt to others, harming others, because we don't reframe ourselves. It's like keeping precept actually is a way to help us to restrain ourselves and not to cause any hurt or harm to others. The sense of the craving, that is come from the sense of self. So whenever you suffer, you investigate, you ask yourself, where is the suffering coming from? I can guarantee you there's nothing outside the sense of self. It's always what we want, isn't it? What we want and our expectation of others. And we're never happy. So whatever, if we are not happy with what we got, so no matter, because when we feed the desires, the craving, it's grow. The only way to stop that is to not to feed it. So when we feed our craving, it's grow bigger and bigger. That's why when our greediness, when we overcome by our greediness, we do a lot of things that that causes a lot of harm to others on the expense of others, because we've been overcome by that greediness, because they're too strong, because our mind is not strong enough to say no. That's why keeping precept is one of the way. Like just recently we have this Vesak, so some of the new Buddhists commit themselves to keep the 5 precepts. Actually, if you be able to say no, actually you are strengthening your mind. Your mind becomes stronger. You'll be able to say no to things. Because sometimes, even deep down, sometimes we know that we shouldn't have said something, isn't it, afterwards. But we couldn't buy back our tongue to say things. But afterwards we regret that we shouldn't have said that. Because the mind is not strong enough, the mind not be able to say no. I don't say that. Said no. But that's why we need to train the mind. Of course, even keeping precept, we are not going to do it perfectly, isn't it? But each time when we reaffirm ourselves, we take the precept, even those we do not keep it perfectly, it's fine. So we do it better next time. So we forgive ourselves any shortcoming. We are not going to keep it perfectly. So this is how we actually keeping precept actually is a training the mind. So when we train the mind, it takes time, isn't it? It's just like a bodybuilder. It takes time to build up the body muscle, isn't it? It's not overnight. Even keeping the precept, So do not carry the guilt. Okay, if I not be able to keep it perfectly, it's fine. So we make sure that we do it better next time. We improve ourselves little by little. So and giving is also one of the way to help us to overcome our craving, our wanting. That's the ego, the sense of self that we want to control. Because when we crave, the mind moves. It's very difficult to still the mind. The mind becomes very restless because we are not happy. So when we are content, we are happy. We're just happy. We do not want anything anymore. Just content with little. But I remember when I was a trainee nun, I have the idea of how a monastic should be. So should be very frugal, just happy with very little, that sort of things. And I remember when I was in Thailand, the practice was quite strict. So I remember the abbot said that, we don't ask for tea, we don't ask for coffee, we don't even ask for honey. So because that is not a necessity, he said, If sugar, salt is okay. If we have coffee, we have coffee. If don't have coffee, we don't have coffee. We have tea, we have tea. We don't have tea, we just don't have tea. So when I come to the West, of course we have the material well-being. We are much more abundant. We have lots of offerings and things like that. And then I started to feel like I started to think that how come I practice contentment, because you have a lot. How come I just to happy with little? And I started to have I become discontent, isn't it, with good things. So actually, lots of people think that or contentment, then I should have things that that inferior things. So it's superior things that, or I shouldn't have superior things. No, contentment, you content with whatever, whether it's good or bad, or superior or inferior. I remember I quite reluctant when I was in the kitchen duty. I reluctant to ask for honey because I think that honey is too luxurious. Because that time I had the idea practice a monastic, very ascetics, you have to be very simple, you shouldn't have this, you shouldn't have that. And then it's about 6 months, my mind keep going on like that. I was discontent. I was thinking, here is too good, too luxurious, how to practice contentment. And only one day I remember there was during the rains, and Ajahn Mahayama asked us to each one read a passage that's of some of the qualities. So of course that time I was having the problem with contentment. So I read a passage that from Mahakassapa, that really woke me up, because they said in the suttas they talk about this describe this Mahakassapa. He said he is someone, he's a ascetics, he's really practice, he's an ascetic practice. He said he content with very little. He content with whether it's superior things or inferior things, whatever. He content with that. Then I realized contentment is not about getting things that all the lousy things, all the inferior things. Because this is the idea, isn't it? Then actually I become discontent when I got something good, isn't it? Then discontent. There's sometimes people think that, practice contentment, then I should starve myself, I should do self-modification, then I'm content. No, contentment with whatever you content with, whatever you experience right now, whether it's pleasant feelings, you content. Unpleasant, you content. Doesn't mean I try to practice contentment with unpleasant feeling. So when pleasant feeling come, you feel guilty. We shouldn't feel, happy with that, isn't it? No, we just content with that. And that when I read that passage that I woke up, I said, actually contentment is not only about getting things that are inferior, isn't it? It's whatever, whether it's even with superior things also we're happy. So since then I'm actually that I really let go, because how your mind, when you hold on to things, you keep thinking about it, isn't it? And then you got annoyed with people, and then you start to judge others, Then I realized that actually I was really lack of that kindness, because I started to judge, because I have this relatively, my body is very healthy, I hardly sick, but some people, not everybody like me have a healthy body, because some of them, they do need that. They do need honey, they do need certain things, But I'm just focused on myself, thinking that everybody like me, and they should be able to do that. They should be able to live very simply. But sometimes people have medical conditions, the body, they need certain things, then they got to have it. That is being kind to oneself. And actually sometimes with only this, sometimes we just keep hitting ourselves on the wall, until for sometimes only you realize, actually you keep practicing, you realize it later, and I realize that, this is what is contentment. content with, not only with inferior things, but only with superior, So that's contentment. Content with even our relationship, No matter, whether you're even, we being positive, we look at because if we tend to, look at someone's shortcoming and we manifest, isn't it? This becomes so big. No one is perfect, isn't it? No one is wholly bad and and wholly good, isn't it? So even that is a so-called a goody, they still have the shortcoming. Even so-called this baddie, they still have some good qualities in them, isn't it? So that's why. So don't worry, even if you have, no matter, just content with with your relationship, whether your husband, your wife, your partners, whether they're bossy or not. So just content with that. Maybe even though they're bossy, but they're very caring. Some people, they just. Sometimes it's just the personality. Some people might have I've seen some people have that personality. It's a bit bossy personality. But when you get to know that person, actually the person have very good heart and quite a caring person. And this remind me of I think a few months ago we have someone to remember the sisters because the sister committed suicide. Because of her husband left her to marry her best friend. So that's why she couldn't take it, she committed suicide. But she also regretted a lot because of the sister told me that actually her brother-in-law is a very good guy. He's really good guy. He's been looking after her sister very well. But her sister is a bit like quite bossy, like controlling and until to the point that the husband said, I have enough, and left her, and she regret, and she really couldn't take it, and she feel really, that why I have done that, and I have such a good husband, but I never appreciate, Then she started to blaming herself that, and carried the guilt, regret and things like that. And to a point that she's jumped into the lake and she killed herself, committed suicide. So that's why sometimes because it's come from the sense of self, the ego, because you try to control the other person, want the person to do things that what you want them to do. So that's why just look at the person good qualities, because we are not content because partly also because we've been conditioned the fault-finding mind, And then talking about a bossy wife, it remind me there was a man that he been bossed around by the wife, so to a point that he got very depressed. So he went to see this psychiatrist. So and then. He has very low self-esteem. So the psychiatrist gave him a book. He said that you read this book, you should, work on yourself that, to be more assertive. So this is a book. Okay, you read this book, next you become more assertive. And because now your self-esteem is very low. So on his way back home, he started to read the books. By the time he reached home, he finished reading the books. So when he get back, he walked into the house and he go in there, he pointing finger to the wife. He said, from today onwards, I am the master of the house. My words is the law. So you have to listen to me. So now you're going to cook me a meal that my favorite meal. So after that, I need a sumptuous dessert. Then you have to draw me a bath so that I can relax. So he said, guess who? After that, guess who is going to comb me and dress me? Then the wife replied, the funeral director. Sometimes, this is how sometimes, we just look at if we focus on, the shortcoming of others, actually it becomes really big. There's you're content with whatever. Because this is a common thing, even recently when I was in Singapore and we have a meditation workshop, and someone asked me a question, I become, when I started to feel peace and calm, so ask me what next. So I said, you never ask next because you want more, isn't it? So it's not good enough. When she feels peaceful and calm, she wants more peaceful. She wants more happiness. I said, whenever you want, your mind is moved. When we want something, we move, and we not be able to enjoy what we got, isn't it? So we keep wanting things, looking out there, what is out there, but we not be able to enjoy this moment, what we got right now. So that's why it's important that we always practice bring our mind back to this present moment awareness. In this moment, practice this moment to moment awareness. Bring our mind back to this moment. Because nowadays we have this multitasking, and because we are not, actually people think that they're doing many things at one time. Actually the mind can only do one thing at a time. Because the mind travels very quick, very fast. It seems like we are doing all these things at one time. Actually, the mind been running around. So the mind become very busy. And the common thing is that they say, how come I very difficult to calm the mind down because the mind is too active. So I say you have to train yourself doing one thing at a time. Whenever you find yourself rushing from one thing to another, you stop. Train the mind to stop, know how to stop. Learn to pacify the mind. So we want to develop this quality of contentment. Actually, keeping precept is help. Because to help us to develop this quality of contentment, to be able to appreciate others, and also be able to give. Because giving is counteract of getting things, getting what we want. That is the opposite, isn't it, when you give? That is the letting go. When we give, we let go. So rather than thinking of what we can get, we think of what we can give. So the giving is also a way to help us to let go of the sense of self, the ego. Because that is really in the way. That is really the sense of self, the ego, the craving is really getting in the way. That's why the mind very difficult to calm down. So once, when we start to give, we become happy and content with little, whatever, because the reason why sometimes when people meditate, and then when they started to think what is the next thing happen, because they are not content in this moment. So this is giving, practice generosity, keeping precept, and meditation actually helps us. And also to reflect is also good. It's one aspect of the mindfulness is the reflection, wise reflection, to remind ourselves, that to remind ourselves and appreciate ourselves, to appreciate our own goodness. So when we do something good, so actually the Buddhas encourage us to reflect on our own goodness, on our own virtue, that gives us the sense of self-respect, the confidence in ourselves, and also the happiness. Because when your mind is happy, you don't want to go anywhere, isn't it? Why people go from one place to another? Because they're not happy. They're not happy So that's why this is a happy path. So if you want to have the still mind, the happiness comes first. That's why keeping precept is also living a good life, because when we are a good person, so we have not done anything that causes any hurt or harm to others, then because we become more peaceful and calm, isn't it? We know for ourselves. If we have done something that we know that is not right, or we just have an argument with someone and we try to meditate, it's very difficult to be still, isn't it? It's very difficult to calm our mind down, because we know, deep down we know, and it's disturbed the mind, it's bothered us. So when we keep the precept, so then we have this gladness, we feel good about ourselves. So when we have this gladness, we have this energy. When we have energy, the mind becomes alert and bright. When the mind becomes alert and bright, we have happiness. When we have happiness, the mind becomes tranquil and still. Then when our mind is still, that is where we have the insight arises. We see things clearly. We can see things more clearly, isn't it? When our mind is still. When our mind is moving, we can't see things, isn't it? When we are moving, when our mind is busy, we only can see things clearly when our mind is still. So not to underestimate your own virtue and your own generosity. Generosity is not only, giving material things, being observant, spending time with our families, and when they need you, you be, there for them, that is, not to be stingy, to your family, especially with your time, and also to be generous to yourself, to have time for yourself. And that is the whole path of practice. And that is a way out to where to develop this contentment and leading to this stillness. So, because this is the whole path of practice, but ultimately that we have to do it ourselves. Because no one can help us to do it. We have to do it ourselves, and we have to be willing to do that. Because the Buddhas can only show you the path. He's teaching. Even the monks or nuns, they can only show you the way, but you have to do it yourself. So that's why Buddhism is a DIY religion. You have to do it yourself. I remember I was asked when I was in Singapore, someone asked me this question. They think that Buddhism is the most confusing religions in the world, because they said that it's very difficult to understand. I said, you cannot understand Buddhism through just reading the text. I said, you have to apply that. You have to put into practice. The Buddhas always said the direct experience, direct knowledge, your own wisdom. So you have to develop your own wisdom to help you to solve your problems in life. It's not that in Buddhism we do not rely on something, some superior, beings, outside us to help us, to free us. No, we free ourselves. We have to do it ourselves. I said you can never understand Buddha's teaching by just reading the text. It's all words, isn't it? You cannot imagine. If someone haven't eat a lemon before, if you try to tell the person how a lemon tastes like, can the person know how a lemon tastes like until the person tastes the lemon, isn't it? So we can only imagine. So the Buddha's teaching is a teaching that is a DIY it's a DIY religion. You have to do it yourself. You have to experience it yourself. First-hand experience. Your direct knowledge. So no one can help us. Only we can free ourselves. So no matter how hard others try to support us, if we are not willing to help ourselves, it's no one going to help us. It's a DIY religion, and we are very fortunate we have the package that is the Noble Four Path, that is to practice generosity, being a virtuous person, develop a peaceful mind, and to cultivate this peaceful mind and to develop wisdom. Ultimately, only the wisdom can free ourselves. With our own wisdom, we solve our problem in our life. It's only through our own wisdom, because the Buddha's only help himself through his own wisdom. Other monks or nuns, those enlightened monks or nuns, they only help themselves through their own realization. And you also can help yourself through your own realization. So I offer this for your reflections, and thank you for listening. So any questions or comments? It seems that everyone is content. I remember when I was in Singapore, someone asked me a question. He said, how do you do that? Like you just give a talk and you don't look at notes and you just talk and talk. I said because if I worry about whether people like my talks or not, it's come from the sense of self, the ego. I said, to me, I do not worry. I said, if all of you like my thoughts, it's fine, you know. If you don't like my thoughts, it's fine. I just don't have to give a talk. I say it's fine. To me, it's a win-win situation. So, so I don't bother, you know, whether, you know, because the bigger the sense of self, the ego, you because you really concern so much, you know, you worry how people look at you, how people think of you, isn't it? Oh, I'm going to give a terrible talks, and you know, and then you so worry about that. So it's okay, you know. I don't know everything. I can only do my best. I can only share my experience, and I don't know everything, you know. So I just only can do my best. If maybe someone asks questions, if I know, I do my best to answer your question. If I don't know, I just say I don't know. so I don't worry about that. I don't know how to answer your questions because I really don't know. So any questions or comment? Okay, that's. Thank you. Okay. Everybody practice contentment today. Yes?
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering, is it possible to entirely get rid of your ego? And if it is, how can you do it?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Is it possible to entirely get rid of your ego?
Because yes, because your question is it possible to intolerate our ego? Huh? Entirely. Yes, it's possible, but it takes time. It's possible, but it takes time. It's very difficult because we've been conditioned that for countless lifetime. You know how it works, the ego. It's just like, I like to give the simile of a wheel, you know. It's just like when our ego, because the defilements is come from our ego, you know. Great hatred and delusion is come from our sense of self. Yeah. So when our defilements is just like the energy, so the wheel is turning. So when we practice, so when our sense of self becomes weaker, and it's just like the wheel is slowed down. So when we reinforce our sense of self, our ego, it's just like we reacting to our defilements. Our ego is like kicking the wheel, and the wheel will keep spinning. It becomes faster. So when someone ego get bigger, and that is becomes you because you are reinforcing that. It's like kicking the wheel when we react to that. So even if we don't react to that, we practicing, we don't react to the defilements, the wheel still spin, but it's become slow. So if we keep doing that, we keep practicing. So even though, for example, like someone very angry, a lot of anger. So even those when the anger comes out, even we don't react to the anger, doesn't mean that next time you don't have anger. The anger still comes out, but it becomes less intense. You weaken the intensity of that and weaker. And then we keep practicing. It's just like we are not kicking the wheel. So the wheel will be slower and slower and slower, and it will stop by itself. Because you are not kicking, you are not reacting. So that's very slow. But we cannot try, if you try to use your willpower to get rid of the sense of self, the ego, actually you reinforce the sense of self, the ego. But the sense of self is to abandon this sense of self is true that letting go, not to interfere. Not because each time you try to interfere, because it's come from the sense of self, like things that we don't like, immediately we react, we try to push it away, isn't it? We reject. Things that we like, we want more, we attach to that, the greed, arises, we want more. So, but we even though we don't react to that, we allow that, and eventually, it's a spin and spin and spinning, and then it will stop by itself. But a lot of people try to stop the sense of self. You cannot stop it. It will stop by itself with letting go of the sense of self. Does it make sense to you? Answer your question? Is there any more questions or comments?
What is the difference between not reacting and suppressing?
Yes. Okay. So, suppressing, not reacting, that means you are accepting. So, when you rejecting, that is suppressed. When we reject something, we push it down. We craving not to be. So a lot of people letting go means accepting. For example, sometimes when we see our own defilements, we cannot accept who we are, isn't it? We keep fighting with that. So that is not accepting. And then sometimes we use all sorts of reasons. We try to justify, we pretend that it's not there, we try to push it aside. Then we are rejecting, we push it aside, rejecting. So when we accept who we are, actually that is letting go. When we accepting, it's letting go. Allow things be. Letting go means allow things be. But we do not want to let things be, isn't it? We always think that is the sense of self. We think that we can control. We try to manipulate. Then it's become counterproductive. So that is the difference. When we reject something, that is suppressed. There's like accepting, that is letting go. Then it's not suppressing. Is it answer your questions? Okay. Yes?
I just want to know how you view tolerance, the subject of tolerance, what your views or your opinions are on that.
Tolerance, yes. So sometimes people think that tolerance means that you try to make everyone the same. Then tolerance actually is that come from the kindness, the accepting who the person is. So, for example, like even other people have different views and opinions, it's okay. we allow people to have different views and opinions. We don't try to make them to have the same way of looking at things, to have the same views and opinions. This is how we can see from ourselves. If we have someone agree with what we said, we like that person. You say, yeah, because this is reaffirm our sense of self. And someone against us, we got so upset, so angry. And then we think that the person's stupid, they don't know. Actually, tolerance means that you allow people to be different. It's okay to be different. We don't try to make them to have the same views and opinions. It's okay. It's not right or wrong because we've been conditioned. We've been brought up in a different culture, different conditioning. And then, like for example, even in our monastery, we have our nuns, we have 7 nationalities. So we have different backgrounds. So things that are important to you may not be important to me. It seems things to me like, not important, but to others people it's important. And then we all have our own idiosyncrasy. And then sometimes you think that the other person is abnormal, then the other person think that we are abnormal too, This is how then we accepting, allowing others to be different. It's okay to be different. Is that answer your question? Okay. So any more questions or comments? So, okay, no more. Going, gone, finish. So we pay respect to the Buddha.